Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Douglas Macgregor asserts that the current state of affairs involves a clear path towards confrontation with Iran, driven primarily by Israeli interests. He highlights a lack of coherent strategy or policy towards the Middle East, suggesting that American actions are merely extensions of Israeli objectives. Macgregor expresses disinterest in supporting campaigns that aim to remove or harm Palestinian Arabs, noting ongoing Israeli actions in Gaza and the West Bank. He emphasizes that war with Hezbollah, Iran, is not in America's interest, despite assertions by certain politicians. Macgregor criticizes the mainstream media, financial sector, and government for unconditionally backing Israel and influencing public opinion, suggesting that many Americans remain unaware of these developments. He suggests that the focus should rightly be on domestic concerns like the border, which has led to shifts in political rhetoric, particularly under the Biden administration. He wants to emphasize the urgent need to address border issues through compromise, noting that discussions around military presence should have occurred much earlier. Referring to historical precedents, he points out that such measures have been implemented in the past. However, despite these actions, he believes there hasn't been substantial progress. He discusses recent attacks targeting American forces, highlighting the unauthorized presence in Syria and the associated risks. He underscores the role of American troops in the region, suggesting their primary objective is to bolster Israeli security despite Israel's superior intelligence capabilities. He mentions challenges regarding oil supply and the potential vulnerability of American interests in the region. He speculates on the intentions behind recent attacks, implicating Arab militias and expressing concerns about Iranian capabilities. He stresses the interconnectedness of various Arab factions and their solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. He criticizes American support for Israeli policies, suggesting it perpetuates. He highlights the imminent threat of attacks from Arab factions in the Middle East, particularly emphasizing the resilience of groups like the Houthis. He criticizes previous American efforts to confront them, citing the challenging terrain and the fighters' determination. He reminds that these groups have endured years of conflict with Saudi Arabia and the U.S., underscoring their readiness to continue fighting until there's a shift in American policy. They support a question for Americans whether they support Israel's actions in Gaza, given the dire humanitarian situation there. He suggests that many Americans may not fully understand the gravity of the situation due to misinformation. He laments the absence of a coherent foreign policy and suggests that American armed forces are effectively serving Israeli interests through the influence of the Israeli lobby. He describes a climate where dissenting voices are stifled, often through accusations of anti-Semitism and other forms of reprisal. He concludes by asserting that currentist foreign policy is effectively dictated by Israeli interests. He underscores the long-standing warnings about the potential escalation of a conflict with Iran, which could draw in regional and global powers like Russia and China. He refers to recent articles outlining the inadequacies of American military preparedness for such a scenario, emphasizing the depletion of essential supplies and the lack of rapid production capabilities. He criticizes influential figures benefiting from the defense industry and foreign lobbies, suggesting they disregard the welfare of American troops. He notes the evolving nature of opponents in the region, highlighting Iran's formidable military capabilities and technical expertise, including their missile arsenal. He provides examples of recent Iranian actions targeting perceived threats, illustrating their precision and reach. He warns against underestimating Iran's capabilities and their ability to retaliate effectively against perceived adversaries. He highlights the precision and effectiveness of attacks carried out by groups like Hezbollah, which could potentially target US forces in various locations, including Kuwait and at sea. He also raises concerns about the significant presence of Hezbollah and other Islamist elements in Mexico, pointing out the potential for multiple fronts in any conflict. He questions the extent of infiltration into the United States, emphasizing the uncertainties surrounding the number of undocumented immigrants. He warns against the dangers of escalating regional conflict, emphasizing the need to consider various levels of warfare, including cyber threats and vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure like power grids and nuclear stations. He criticizes the prevailing belief among Americans that war only happens elsewhere, cautioning against the dangers of complacency and the potential for catastrophic consequences akin to historical conflicts. He opposes the hawkish stances of figures like Lindsey Graham and Senator Cornynine, arguing against the rush towards conflict and advocating for a more cautious approach. He clarifies his stance against Arab Islamist organizations that advocate for Israel's destruction, emphasizing the complexity of the situation and the need for nuanced considerations. He clarifies that he doesn't support Hamas under any circumstances and opposes the displacement or violence against millions of Palestinians. He denies being aligned with Hamas and expresses concern about Israel's actions following certain events, particularly regarding the treatment of Arab populations in Gaza and the West Bank. He highlights Israel's current isolation in the international community, drawing parallels to past conflicts where similar situations arose, such as in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Somalia. He criticizes the lack of clarity in the initial objectives of interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, pointing out failures in military intelligence regarding figures like Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. He reflects on the prolonged presence in Iraq and Afghanistan, noting the shifting rationale for military involvement and the role played by other actors such as Iran and Russia in combating ISIS. He observes that many Turks and other Arabs in the region were sympathetic to ISIS, although they now maintain silence on the matter. He believes that eliminating Islamist elements entirely from the Sunni side is unrealistic, emphasizing that the current presence in Iraq and Syria isn't primarily aimed at addressing this issue. He contends that the presence in the region ostensibly aims to enhance Israel's security, but argues that it exposes American forces to significant risk without effectively achieving this goal. He warns of the grave consequences if the conflict escalates into a full-fledged war, particularly regarding Iran's missile capabilities and the potential use of nuclear weapons by Israel. He suggests pressuring Israel to halt its operations in Gaza as a crucial step to prevent further escalation. Rejecting accusations of anti-Semitism for advocating this stance regarding Turkey, he sees Erdogan as shrewdly seizing opportunities and leveraging NATO membership for influence. He mentions recent geopolitical maneuvers involving Turkish cooperation with NATO and the French Navy, despite historical animosities between Turkey and France. He comments on the strained cooperation between Turkey and NATO, suggesting that if given the choice, Turkey might prefer to sink the French fleet. He criticizes NATO's current state, attributing its decline to being dragged into proxy wars that ultimately benefited Russia. He laments a series of strategic mistakes that have strengthened Russia and weakened Western interests. He expresses concern that Israel may shift its focus from Gaza to Hezbollah, a move that could escalate tensions and potentially lead to war with Iran. He highlights shared interests among Muslim nations in dealing with what they perceive as a disruptive and dangerous Israel. He emphasizes the significance of recent provocations at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, noting the widespread anger directed towards Israel and its allies in the West. He concludes by warning of the dangerous path towards conflict and disaster that current policies seem to be leading towards. He describes the playbook of neoconservatives who he believes are part of a larger globalist elite seeking to transform society into compliant entities devoid of individuality and spirituality. He criticizes this materialistic approach to human beings as fungible commodities, drawing parallels to Trotsky's ideology. He acknowledges the potential for global catastrophe, but highlights differences from past conflicts, noting that the slow burn of tensions today contrasts with the rapid escalation seen in the lead-up to World War I. He predicts that by April or May, all the pieces for potential conflict will be in place, with external actors likely becoming involved.